What is sustainability? We hear about it through social media and public events, and it's even tossed around in our day-to-day language. But what does this word mean? Sustainability is the endurance of systems and processes. You can think of it as continuing a cycle. To say something is sustainable is to say that it will continue to exist in some manner. So why does this word matter? Well, if by definition sustainability is the continuation of something, then it matters on a very natural scale. Living requires sustainable actions. If you stop eating or drinking, you are no longer sustaining your existence. But this isn't quite the sustainability we mean. For that, we need to look at the big picture. If we care about the sustainability of the human race, then by default we have to care about the sustainability of the resources we depend upon for life as we know it. So here's the big question for the big picture. What does it mean to live sustainably? In this documentary, I will talk a lot about beavers, the North American fur trade, and how this relates to living sustainably, discuss different resource harvesting practices used today, and finally discuss sustainable methods and technologies for harvesting resources. But first, let's go over some terms so we all know what we're talking about. We now know what sustainability means, but what do all of these mean? An ecosystem is a biological community of interacting organisms in their physical environment. Within an ecosystem, you have a food web or trophic levels, where the organisms of an ecosystem are interacting with one another, in many cases by eating each other. In ecosystems, you also have what are known as keystone species. These are species of which others in an ecosystem are highly dependent. If you remove a keystone species from the ecosystem, it will change drastically. The name comes from how an arch is constructed. At the top of an arch sits a stone that holds the entire arch in place, known as the keystone. If you remove this, the rest of the arch crumbles. More important terms include renewable and non-renewable resources. Renewable resources are resources which are potentially capable of regenerating after harvesting in a sustainable manner. Let's think about grass. When you cut your lawn, your grass grows back, so that when you cut it again, it grows back. You cut it, it grows, cut, grow, cut, grow. This is a renewable resource. Grass has the ability to regenerate after it has been harvested. Zillions of things around the world are renewable. Grain crops, ranch animals, fish, trees, bird eggs, the list goes on. So then, non-renewable resources are present around the world in finite quantities. They do not regenerate after being harvested and used, and can never be used in a sustainable fashion. These are resources that can only be mined, such as your metals like copper and nickel, oil and gas fall here, and other precious gemstones. Finally, overexploitation is the overuse of resources by humans. This can be in the form of food, pets, medicine, clothing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if this is a movie on sustainability, why are we talking about beavers? That's a very good question. To explain that, we need to first understand the beaver itself. For starters, beavers, from the rodent family Castoridae, are just cool animals. These guys are the second largest rodents in the world. They are semi-aquatic and have a ginormous appetite for chomping down trees. They are found in wet habitats and build dams or lodges, and are known as ecosystem engineers. This is because they're a keystone species. Beavers are a keystone species because the dams they build create massive areas of still water. To do this, they cut down certain tree species in the area, giving other tree species an advantage. These impacts diversify the flora and fauna of the ecosystem. Different trees attract different animals. Still water is more favorable for certain algae and spawning fish. Filtering plants can thrive on the water's edge. These still water areas allow many species to flourish, such as narrowleaf cottonwood, wood ducks, and green frog, to name a few. These wetland ecosystems are very important to filtering nutrients and overall keeping the world happy and healthy. But what happens if you remove the beaver? Without the beaver around to cut down trees and to make large still water areas, the diversity we just saw will drop back to what it was before the beaver. This is a normal process that happens all the time, and though it seems to be like a big impact on a small scale, on a big scale, change can be beneficial. This change allows for a different sort of diversity to take place. Beavers can leave an area for many reasons. However, when a lot of beavers all over a large area are suddenly removed, there's a larger impact on the environment. The change in biodiversity is much greater this time, and this is where problems can arise. This is where the North American fur trade comes into play. Here's a quick overview. At the time, fur was the fashion statement in Europe. But they didn't just want any fur. They wanted beaver fur. Beaver pelts were all the rage. Apparently, they made great top hats. These animals had a huge impact on what eventually became Canada. But the demand for beaver pelts during the fur trade was astounding. Everyone wanted beaver. It was like they caught beaver fever. Not that kind of beaver fever. The Europeans wanted beaver pelts, and also castoreum, which is a beaver secretion used in some perfumes and medicine. And to get these, they ended up nearly annihilating both the Eurasian beaver and the North American beaver in order to get them. By the end of the fur trade, there were very few beavers left. So remember what happens when you remove beavers from an area? The ecosystem will change. And when you remove a lot of beavers, these changes can be drastic and detrimental. In the case of the Americas, studies have found that when the beaver was removed from such a vast stretch of land, there was a huge drop in biodiversity. Fewer waterfowl, fewer large animals coming to the ponds to drink, because there's no ponds left, and fewer wetland plants, which people and animals of the area relied upon for sustenance. In other words, the way beavers were harvested during the North American fur trade was not sustainable. More beavers were harvested than being born, which almost exterminated this keystone species and changed the environment drastically. Beavers are just one example of overexploitation for human use. There are many more, like cod, rainforests, and what happened on Easter Island. But not everything we harvest is done in an unsustainable manner. Remember renewable and non-renewable resources? Well, we have already agreed that non-renewable resources are not capable of being mined sustainably. But there are many renewable resources out there that are. We harvest eucalyptus for printing paper, fell trees for building homes, raise chickens for their eggs, crops for their grains, and throw nets in the oceans for the fishing industry. As you can see, there are a lot of different methods for harvesting resources. For the sake of brevity, let's focus on timber harvesting and commercial fishing. Trees are a renewable resource, right? Well, technically speaking, yes. They do regenerate, but this process of growing from a seed to a sapling to a fully fledged tree doesn't happen over a few months. It takes many years. Some tree harvesting processes used today include seed tree cutting, where the best trees are left standing in order to propagate future generations, selective cutting, where the best trees are removed from the ecosystem, shelter wood cutting, which is a series of cuts over time to allow for new trees to grow, and clear cutting, which removes everything. Because trees take a long time to grow, some methods are more sustainable than others, but there are key factors involved as well. Depending on what the timber will be used for, such as fuel or building, the quality of the tree matters. If you're building a log cabin, saplings won't be strong enough. If you're burning wood, you don't really need the best of the trees, you just need a lot of it. As well, time, energy for harvesting, and demand and money for the trees are other factors. Clear cutting, though not a sustainable method, is easier to do than spending time figuring out which trees to cut and how to cut and then remove them for use. Keeping in mind, trees are a large part of the world's carbon dioxide filters and overall carbon storage. Removing a lot of these at once, such as in clear cutting, is very damaging to the environment. Commercial fishing is important in our world today because it provides at least 15% of animal protein intake to 2.9 billion people as of 2010. In order to do this, fisheries intensively harvest from the oceans. The higher the demand for the type of fish thereafter, the more intensively they harvest. Some harvesting practices include trawling, where large vessels drag a large net through the water to catch fish, multiple hooks and multiple lines, traps, and nets, which can be dropped in the water and pulled up, left to catch prey and return to, etc. Methods such as bottom trawling are not only unsustainable, but largely environmentally destructive. Sustainable methods minimize the capture of species unintended for harvesting and harvest without depleting stock productivity. So how do we live sustainably? First and foremost, we should remember the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. These are important especially for precious metals, other non-renewable resources, and materials that do not naturally degrade in the environment, like plastics. Harvesting sustainably doesn't always require new resources, and many goods can be produced or reused from recycled material. However, not everything can be reduced, reused, or recycled. So here are some methods for harvesting resources sustainably. Energy. Solar panels and photovoltaic cells are becoming more efficient at capturing and converting light energy into a form we can use. Solar concentrators, which are big mirrors that superheat oil in order to generate electricity, are also increasing in popularity. These are sustainable in that the sun's energy, UV radiation, is constant. Wind energy, on the other hand, can be harvested through turbines or windmills and is sustainable in windy places around the world. Food. Plant-based diets are more sustainable compared to meat-based diets. This is because meat-based diets overall require more land, water, and energy resources to generate the same amount of food, which makes sense, seeing as animals typically eaten around the world are herbivores. Which means it takes a lot of plant material, water, and energy over a long period of time to make one animal than it does to make the same mass of plants. As for fish, sustainable methods for harvesting include elimination of non-target species being captured, but more importantly, making sure overexploitation doesn't occur. To do this, care has to be taken in monitoring stock productivity, such as observing locations of spawning grounds and protecting these areas. Material resources. Tree harvesting can be done sustainably, but effort needs to be taken to ensure that new generations of trees are thriving. For this, we have tree nurseries and different systems for ensuring the propagation of species in the wild. A good example of this is shelter wood cutting. There are other options to using trees as well. For example, eucalyptus plants are easily grown in laboratories and harvested to create low-quality paper. It is important to remember that, like the beaver, the health of our planet and resources we depend upon have the potential to be overexploited. The key is to maximize our sustainability yield. What is the largest amount we can harvest without damaging the productivity of the resource? In this way, we can have a happy, sustainable home. Thank you for watching. I hope this documentary gave you some ideas on what it means to live sustainably. If you are interested in any of the topics I mentioned in this video, please look to the description to find the sources cited. Also, you should check out ASAP Science on YouTube. This group is amazing and an incredible inspiration for this video. My name is Kira McLaughlin, and this documentary was created for Biology 381 class at the University of Alberta 2014.